Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us in person and online for this third in-person meeting of the Study on Northeast University and U.S. Ocean Studies community. Next slide. So this study is being conducted through the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, and it's in that building right now. Under the auspices of the Ocean Studies Board. Here are some of the objectives of that on the screen. Feel free to go online to read more about it. Next slide. So there is a code of conduct here for anything that we're doing through the National Academies. We are committed to this being a professional and cordial environment. We do not tolerate in all forms of discrimination, harassment, and bullying are prohibited here. And us as a committee are very focused on making a safe and inclusive space. And so in that regard, we have certain principles we would like to try to foster. That includes introducing yourself the first time you talk with your name and affiliation. Please mute yourself when you're not talking and use the hand raise function to ask a question. Next slide. This is a 24-hour. Oh, that would be really terrible. This is a 24-month study, and the sponsors for it are BOEM, Office of Naval Research, NOAA, and National Science Foundation. We expect to have the study released in 2025. Next slide. Here's our statement of task. I will not read it, but you can go to the website for this study if you'd like to read it in detail. Next slide. And here are our committee members. Again, if you'd like to look at this list in more detail, you can go to the website. Next slide. Our project timeline. So as you can see, we are midway through, more than midway through this study. This is our third official in-person committee meeting, hybrid meeting. In February, we'll have the last of 4 meetings, and then we'll go into a peer review process, which includes review by experts, pre-publication, and then the final report is expected to be released in the end of August of 2025. Next slide. Anyone who is joining us for the first time, I really would encourage you to sign up for notifications about this study. And to do so, you have to go to the study's webpage. Even if you are signed up for studies for the Ocean Studies Board, notifications from the Ocean Studies Board, for this study, you have to go to the website and submit the information. So I would encourage you to do that, and please share that information with anyone who you think would also like to stay abreast of what this committee is doing. Next slide. Here's our agenda. I just want to highlight what we're hoping to achieve over these next couple of days, more than going into specifics. So the next couple of days, we'll have a series of lightning talk sessions. And the intention of that is to give us an overview of some programs working in different spaces that could serve as a model that others could learn from. And with these lightning talks, we're not trying to extract everything that's been done, but to get a sense of the landscape of what's out there and create an entry point to deeper conversations later with some of these programs. So we'll begin the day focusing on undergraduate and graduate programs in STEM, so not just ocean-focused programs, because we recognize that we, as an ocean studies community, could learn from other fields as well. Next slide. And then late morning, early afternoon, we'll continue with the second session on undergraduate programs and graduate programs, at this time focused specifically on ocean sciences. Next slide. The second day, we're going to transition to ocean studies funding and philanthropic organizations to understand their importance in helping to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion. Next slide. And then we'll end the lightning talk sessions looking at postgraduate, academic staff, professional societies, organizations, people who are organizations that are invested in the continuing career stage after education. And next slide. Moment on safety, so this is the map. Please orient yourself. If there's emergency, go to your nearest exit. If you need something to do or a break, wander around and find the exit. Okay, next. I trust a room full of PhDs to find the exit, so that's okay. Just the meeting logistics. So I think most of us are online now. Is anyone having any trouble getting online in the room? No, good, great. Virtual participants, please mute yourself when you're not speaking, just to keep the space distraction free. And everyone, please raise your hand and use the chat feature and turn on your camera if you can and feel comfortable, just to create a sense of community. It's a long day to just look at names and photos. So if you feel comfortable doing that, please do turn on your camera. Next slide. And finally, and very importantly, we want to acknowledge the land in which we are sitting right now. So we acknowledge that we gather on the traditional land of the Choctaw and Piscataway people, past and present, and honor with gratitude, the land itself and the people who have stewarded it throughout the generations. We honor and respect the enduring relationship that exists between these people and the nations and this land. We thank them for their resilience in protecting this land and aspire to uphold our responsibilities to their example. And I think that is particularly relevant to us as we engage in this work and move forward. And now I will pass the baton to Kelly, I think. That's Whitney.
Yeah,
Whitney,
great.
yes.
That was my fault. I'm so used to doing it the normal way. Hello, all. So we'll dive in a minute because I know we literally have 6 people that we want to sort of hear from. And so I know each of you have 7 minutes to really share the insights from your undergraduate or graduate program, what you were doing, what sort of insights we can hopefully gain from it. And then at the close, we will take a Q&A session. So I'm just going to request for everyone, if you have a question or comment around or for any individual, if you can either put it in the chat or hold it so that we can actually get through all 6 talks at the top and then go from there. Does that sound good to everyone?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. All right, so I'd love to hear from our first talk, which is actually a member of the committee. And please, around the Meyerhoff Scholars Program.
So my presentation is on the Meyerhoff Scholars Program and pursuing academic excellence, scientific research, and the advancement of underrepresented students of color in the STEM fields. Next slide. Quick Meyerhoff history. The founder, Dr. Freeman Hrabowski, who after he started the program soon became UMBC president, which post he held for 30 years. The initial funder was a local philanthropist, Joseph Meyerhoff, therefore the program name, and his family. The first year focus was on African-American males, but over the years, the focus broadened. The current focus is all high-achieving high school seniors committed to STEM doctoral study and, importantly, interested in the advancement of underrepresented groups in STEM. Next slide. A few selected program accomplishments. 450 Meyerhoff Scholars Programs alumni have received STEM PhDs. Over 70 of these hold faculty positions. 70% of the 249 current students are from underrepresented racial ethnic groups. And the Meyerhoff program is widely recognized as a national model of a highly successful STEM intervention program. Next slide, please. Here's a photo of the most recent graduating class. You can see it's quite diverse and gives you a feel for the faces of the students when they're graduating. Next slide, please. So I conducted a longitudinal program evaluation from '89 to 2022 when I retired from UMBC. Just a few findings. The Meyerhoff students are 5.3 times more likely to attend a STEM PhD program than comparison students, and 4.8 times more likely than the comparison students. And for this research, comparison students were defined as all students accepted into the program who declined the offer, instead pursuing a STEM major at other universities. Next slide, please. These are a number of the major program components. There's more. The Summer Bridge Program, intensive, bonding, difficult, mentoring, research experience, advising, cultural enrichment, scientific conferences, graduate and professional school placement, community service, professional development, and staff support. And I want to underscore that the staff is a large staff, 6, 7 staff, and they are major reasons the program is successful, along with the faculty. Next slide, please. The program, the next set of slides is totally from the program staff perspective. They focus on academic prep, supportive relationships, commitment to the PhD goal, and students having a sense of ownership and accountability. You can see they're interrelated, and right in the center is high expectations. This is a program, incredibly high expectations, demanding, but also incredibly high levels of support and resources to carry that support out. Next slide, please. Academic preparation includes helping students acclimatize to the collegiate environment, working on their study skills, evaluating them and modifying them, and very individualized academic plans for each student, which gets modified regularly. Next slide, please. Also in the academic realm is academic advising within the department by STEM faculty, particularly their research mentors, and by peers, very important, the peers advising. This is also career advising through the graduate school, professional development activities, program visits, site visits, professional talks, and very importantly, from their research mentors, both on-site and off-site. Next slide, please. Research opportunity is a central part of the program, early exposure, lab tours, site visits, professional talks, scientific presentations, sustained research, usually 4 years of research, at least 3 years of research, some on campus, some off campus, and a focus on publishing as an undergrad. Next slide, please. In that light, since 1992, over 200 of the Meyerhoff Scholars as undergrads have been published, including 3 on the covers of the Journal of Molecular Biology. Next slide, please. I'm going quickly. I'm trying to embody lightning speed. Building relationships. One aspect of that is the peer relationships, connection to their peer counselor, connection to current students and alumni, and very importantly, connection within the cohort. There's a lot of focus in Summer Bridge on team building, diversity training, and group responsibility. It's not only for you, but you're here for the others in the program and in your cohort. Next slide, please. Relationships are also important to the program more generally, particularly the program staff, daily interaction, early advising, strong monitoring, and so on, and the connection to the larger campus community, including key instructors, helping students understand what a professor is, and it's not just learning by sitting passively, and very importantly, connections to the administration, including the fellow standing in this picture, who's the president of UMBC and the founder of the program, Dr. Rabowski, meeting with a bunch of the students informally. Next slide. Commitment to goals is an important part of the staff's role in the program, as well as the mentors. And students need to know the rigors of going on the PhD path to get there. They reevaluate their knowledge, they modify existing practices all along the way. They define measurable goals for this, jointly decide on measurable steps towards these goals, and there's positive reinforcement and support for all the practices. And of course, these 3 practices are interrelated. Next slide, please. And then the 4th pillar from the staff's point of view is cultivating ownership and accountability. That includes fostering a legacy. There's a great focus on the legacy of the program, and you're not only here for yourself and your peers, but for the program's legacy. Interdependence, promoting the program. Students are actively involved in the community and in high schools and elsewhere promoting the program, and connection to both the campus community, the program community, and the larger community, in part through community service. This is a graduation celebration with Dr. Rabowski in the front of the governor's mansion, which as president of the university, he's able to arrange. Next slide. So very central to the program. I always include it as the key program component is the values. The program works really hard to instill intellectual curiosity, to reinforce it, to have students should be committed to science and research. Scholars should be comfortable discussing issues of diversity. Program really emphasizes that excellence is the goal, but that demands sacrifice. The focus on high standards, high expectations, not fearing failure, but also not fearing success. Encouraging others consistently is a major value. The ability and desire to work well with others. The importance of service, community service, service to the university, and the focus on functioning well in both leadership and supporting roles. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, quickly, we went really, really quickly, but there's this great focus in the program. There's a magic to this program that I didn't believe would be in a program where the students really, not every single student, but the vast majority become committed to growing together, particularly as a cohort, learning together, discovering together, serving together, the upper right picture, and succeeding together. And it's really quite a remarkable program. There's lots more longitudinal evaluation data of different types that I don't have time to share today. Now we're going to go on to just a few final slides quickly, even more quickly. So next slide, please. Graduate school placements, all kinds of different universities, but mostly major universities around the country in PhD programs in STEM. Next slide, please. Tons of national recognition, all kinds of outlets, all kinds of places, all kinds of people, including the National Academy of Sciences. Two books came out early, midway through the program about the students in the program, the males, how they got to where they are and how the program helped them succeed, and the females in the program. And final slide, next slide, please, is just a select list of publications that highlight the findings in the current study. Also, the last one is in the journal Science, and that extends beyond the study to looking at outcome findings for places where the program has been replicated or adapted. And I am done. I hope I wasn't too fast. Thank you for
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate it. All right, we'll move on to our next one. Remember, if you have questions, put them in the chat or just hold on to them and I will get to them at the end. All right, Sen, can you please get started?
Yes.
And I will actually start a timer going forward, so just be forewarned, I will give you a minute warning in the chat.
Yes, thank you. I actually have a timer on my computer too. Yeah. I'm going to pivot a little bit down the different angle, talking about in terms of the recruitment, in terms of how we more specifically focus on the effort to really boost the number of students from underrepresented group, actually. So I'm going to share with you a little bit more on the best practice and what things we are doing. Next slide, please. So again, a different angle talking about the subject area. We are sort of like under a mission, NCSM, which is the NOAA Cooperative Science Center in atmospheric science and meteorology. So we have been funded by NOAA Office of Education in the past 20+ years, actually. So every 5 years we have the funding cycle. So the idea is actually very straightforward in terms of how, as you can see here, this is the primary goal, that to produce a diversity and highly skilled cadet of technically and environmental literature professionals. This long forms of words, but you can actually see that at the end of the day, what we are trying to do is to train the next generation or even current generation in terms of the future workforce, in terms of working for NOAA. Next slide, please. So as you can see, the objective for the program is basically education, training, and graduation. So that's actually the bottom of the what we are doing in terms of how we recruit students, how we train the student, how we design the program, how we tailor each individual student to fit into the particular pathway that student will be able to succeed and then create the future career trajectory. So as you can see, as I say, it's NOAA funded. I'm not necessarily narrow-minded, but it's just NOAA funded. So we are very much focused on NOAA mission field. NOAA workforce impact, that's one big thing in our agenda. And then particularly, as I say, we combine the training and the education all together. So we create some kind of cohort atmosphere, environment that students really get involved as a part of NOAA from the beginning until they finish the degree, even go to NOAA. So along the line, we have the professional development, as you can expect. We have quite a few events every year, pretty much every month, actually. And then we have the core competence training in terms of how to let this individual understand the mission, this is not typical fellowship. This is exactly what we design. We don't call it fellowship. I basically tell all of fellows, but this is not a scholarship. This is actually particular design for the fellow. Next slide. A little bit tiny small words here, but as you can see, we kind of like a really design in terms of 5-tiered approach to develop the talent pipeline in terms of recruiting, how we particularly target certain students, certain group, certain area, and then we train them, we help them along the line, and then we even the last part, which is on the right, we even pair them in terms of the workforce, the future, the careers stuff as well. Next. As you can see, along the line, we have a lot of things that we really want to make sure this individual student or fellow understand what they are doing, and then really engage individual to they involve not only the academic environment, but also working with NOAA mentor as well. So we develop individual study plan. Again, from the beginning, we have that student development plan. Every semester, we need to update the plan. And then we have the 12 weeks training for for 10 weeks for undergraduate students, and then 12 weeks for graduate students that working at one of the NOAA facility, that working with either one or two NOAA mentors that develop the research, the project. So that way we kind of better engage on that. Next slide. The best practice, again, this is kind of like a summary based on the previous several years, or maybe even more a decade, in terms of how we create the relationship with students and the support individual students, develop personal development, and then the experience at the NOAA facility to really further engage on that. So next slide. So the next step, again, and I kind of run a little bit too fast, but as you can, the ballpark of what we are doing is really targeting a group of students that we not necessarily handheld, but it's actually from the beginning, we make them individual engage on different projects, different steps, understand the organization, understand the mission. So that way we even have that, I don't think I put it here, is that maybe you already heard about that, like directly hire certificate, which is part of the, after they go through the program, they would be able to go through the hurdle in terms of the USAJob.gov, that kind of a thing. So they have the opportunity to really get hired relatively smooth that way. So next step, again, develop other things. This is actually my last slide here. I just want to quickly summarize in terms of how in the past 6 years, put that way, 2016 to 2022, that was the previous funding cycle that we have quite a bit of achievement in terms of the student number, in terms of how many students engage with the project, and etc. Now, one last thing on the left, which on the right, is the program. We finally developed a new department right now at Howard University, which is the Department of Earth, Environment, and Equity, the E3 department. The first cohort of students will come in 2025 fall semester. So this is basically one of the kind, a very unique program for really targeting our underrepresented community looking into further detail on Earth's environment and equity issues. This is really on the top of the agenda in terms of how we deal with this geoscience community as well. Thank you.
So really appreciate it. So I'd like to move on next to Marissa for the SOARS program. Marissa, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, perfect, thank you.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm Marisa Vada, the interim program lead of the U.S. National Science Foundation, Significant Opportunities in Atmospheric Research and Science, also known as NSF SOARS. I know it's a mouthful. I will just call it NSF SOARS. Moving on. Next slide, please. So what is NSF SOARS? NSF SOARS is an undergraduate to graduate bridge program designed to broaden participation of marginalized communities in the atmospheric and related sciences. The program is 11 weeks, multi-year, up to 4 years, and doesn't need to be consecutive. We provide a competitive stipend as well as housing and transportation for each protege. We also provide support to each protege and present at a conference. We also provide support for each protege to present at a conference if they choose to. Next slide, please. So just to give some history on NSF SOARS has been an exemplar of science research and mentoring program for the past 28 years. The program has a unique history by really being a response to systemic exclusion in the STEM fields. The program was created to address 3 needs of the country. 1, the standing in the world and with respect to the diversity in science. 2, the need for innovation in global economy. And 3, the feedback of students to help create the program's key components. Next slide, please. So NSF SOARS was submitted in 1994 as a collaborative proposal intended to address the low representation of women and marginalized racial and ethnic groups in the highest levels of academia, disciplines, and professional pathways. The data from 1990 reported that there were 5 Black, 1 Native American, and 21 Hispanic recipients in the Earth, atmospheric, and ocean sciences that had earned doctoral degrees. If we fast forward to nearly 30 years later, today in 2020, or nearly, we see some progress. The overall percentage is not much different for those who earned advanced degrees, but there is some progress there. For me, that's the reason why programs like NSF SOARS and a lot of what we're going to hear today need to exist, because it's more than just exposing our students to these fields, but we really need to be better at retaining them and providing a community of and sense of belonging for them. Next slide, please. We're aware of the need for continuous innovation, which drives the global economy. This innovation relies on our society and the implementation of their ideas through research. We can't afford to miss out on the talent from those marginalized communities. So we do need to be better at providing an inclusive field. The data shows the past 10 years of, while again, there is progress, it's not much progress and we can do better. If we limit the science that we do, we won't be very inclusive. We will limit the science we do if we're not more inclusive. Next slide, please. And the last component of SOARS that's really core to our foundation is really listening to the students' feedback. Before the program was created back in the early 1990s, NSF, NCAR, UCAR staff interviewed students asking what they wanted from the program. They answered authentic research opportunities with scientists, multiple years to build upon research or come back and try something new, competitive wages, and tuition assistance for graduate school. Today, we continue to use that student feedback to improve the program and continue to grow with that current student population and what they desire from the career pathways and workforce of today. Next slide, please. So today, NSF SOARS still exists and has maintained the 3 pillars of research, mentoring, and community. You can see here, there's an image from the 1996 cohort, the first cohort, to today's past summer cohort in 2024. Next slide, please. Our current statistics are that there are 267 proteges who completed NSF SOARS, 255 bachelor's degrees completed, 135 master's degrees completed, 88 are enrolled in either a bachelor's, master's, or doctoral program, 54 doctoral degrees have been completed, and 53 are enrolled in PhD programs. Next slide, please. So the program today continues to remain an undergraduate to graduate and careers pathways program designed to broaden participation of marginalized communities. Our data from the past 5 years show that we have, on average, 80% of our cohort are from racial and ethnically marginalized communities in STEM. Next slide, please. NSF SOARS is also best known for their multidimensional mentoring model. We have gotten awards for this mentoring model. As you can see here, we had a presidential award in 2001, and then in 2019, Diversity and Inclusion Program of the Year awarded by the US 2020 Makers and Mentors organization. Here is a quote from one of our proteges. SOARS is an amazing program because of how much support each protege is given. I think that having a writing, a peer, a community mentors, in addition to research mentors, is really great. Next slide, please. So mentors are the heart of NSF SOARS. The NSF SOARS mentoring model looks like this. It's composed of 5 different mentors to provide holistic support to the protege. We provide a research mentor, a writing mentor, a computational mentor, a peer mentor, and a community coach. And we hope that our mentors can bring scientific communication and computing guidance, confidence building, introductions and networking, ethics and professional behavior and role modeling, collaborations, insight into life as a scientist, career guidance, and a sense of belonging. Next slide, please. NSF SOARS is also known for the community that it is provided to proteges. We work with mentors year-round to provide resources and tools to mentors who are exposing themselves or being mentors who are mentoring students from marginalized backgrounds. We also strive to create holistic, inclusive community for all students to cultivate a sense of belonging all year long. There are also multiple groups and activities with proteges throughout the summer, organization-wide events, like the Poster Symposium, Ice Cream Social. And just for the sake of time, I'm just going to read this quote real quickly. The community is unmatched. I have never felt so seen and supported before. Research is very intimidating and stressful, but my fellow proteges made it approachable, and I felt like I had people to rely on and wasn't competing against them. I felt like a valuable part of my research team and like my opinion and work really mattered. And then in the final slide, just wanted to share that our applications are now open. The requirements are that you need to be enrolled in a degree granting institution, not have a bachelor's degree in STEM, and at least 1 semester left in your bachelor's or your undergraduate, and must be a US citizen and permanent resident. Thank you.
So, it's wonderful. Excellent. I hope the questions are piling in. I'll read them at the close. So I'd like to transition now to Claire for the Next Gen program.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Claire Raftery, and I'm the coordinator of UCAR's Next Generation Fellowship Program. Next slide, please. So this program was initiated by UCAR's president, Tony Busalaki, in 2017, and it really has roots in the SOARS program that we just heard from Marisa. Marisa talked extensively about the issues with retention that we continue to see, and that's really what this program is designed to tackle. We are taking the cohort and community principles of the SOARS program and then expanding its focus. So instead of only focusing on atmospheric science, we're focusing on all of Earth system science, in addition to diversity, equity, and inclusion practices and science policy. We try to accomplish this by removing obstacles to graduation, which I'll get into in just a few moments. And the goal here is then that we end up with cohorts that have a diversity of identity and of experience as they prepare for their futures in the professional field. Next slide, please. So this is a deep but narrow program, meaning that we have small numbers of students, but we have very deep engagement. And this somewhat differs from many other models that are popular at the moment, where other programs may be able to accommodate more students, but the depth of engagement would not be quite as deep as the Next Gen program. We have 3 fellows per year, 1 fellow for each of the tracks that you see on the screen. So we have a science research fellow, a science policy fellow, and a diversity, equity, and inclusion fellow. And they each have a 2-year tenure. And so we have a rolling cohort of 6 fellows per year, 3 new fellows starting the program and 3 existing fellows rising to their 2nd year. Next slide, please. The big picture vision for this program is rooted in this concept of cross-training in different and often extramural professional areas. So the idea here is that by supporting Earth System Science grads in exploring the extramural areas of DEI and science policy, the Earth System Science field benefits from the future DEI and policy experts with a science background and future scientists who are trained in DEI and policy. And simultaneously, our students benefit from professional experience beyond the standard scientific expertise that you get in graduate school. And in doing so, they're prepared for future leadership roles and as they move into their careers. And then I haven't added this on the slide, but they have the benefit of funds and acknowledgement of work that is often expected to be done for free, this extramural work of exploring diversity and policy impacts of their hard science research. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that the program goal is to help to tackle attrition in the Earth System Science. And so far, the program seems to be addressing this successfully. This program is reasonably young, and so we don't have the same longitudinal data that some of the longer term programs have. But I can say that 100% of our fellows and alumni have graduated or are still enrolled in graduate school pursuing their postgraduate degree. 100% of our participants hold at least one minoritized identity. And to address this concept of diversity of expertise, our alumni are moving into really interesting, varied and powerful roles. We have somebody who's currently interning at the White House. We have other folks who are working in different areas of government at universities across the country, research organizations, and in a whole variety of federal agencies. So of our 24 participants since 2017, this word cloud shows the roles and locations that they're currently engaged in. Next slide, please. So how are we tackling these retention issues? So if we look at the research to show why students leave STEM fields, 2 major issues arise, money and discrimination. So on the left here, we can see that the financial burden of pursuing a STEM degree is significant. So the literal cost of going to school, the tuition amounts for STEM degrees is often higher than other majors. Since most most jobs require a PhD in STEM fields, that means that students are facing a decade or so in school, and during that time, they're not earning significant wages. And then when we do graduate, our income prospects are moderate at best for the most part, especially those of us who continue into academic roles and not into industry, for example. So then on the right-hand side, students of color face discrimination at incredible rates. So studies show that up to 40% of students of color leave STEM because of this discrimination and bias that they experience. And the National Academies has recorded this in a recent report. And I think this summarizes one of the major challenges that we face as a field overall. White-centered culture in STEM establishes the criteria that perpetuate success based on similarity or likeness to the in-group. So basically familiarity bias. We recruit, we promote, we support those who look like us. And if we're already struggling to have students who don't look like us in the field, then they're at an additional disadvantage. So with the Next Gen program, we are attempting to address this chilly climate faced by marginalized students directly and head on. Next slide, please. So the theory of change for this program is that significant financial support plus in-depth professional development that is personalized to each individual fellow, in addition to academic coaching, which is especially valuable for first-generation students, and as I mentioned earlier, access to extramural training beyond the areas of scientific research will hopefully result in empowered graduates who are experienced in interdisciplinary skills and ready to become change makers and leaders in the field of earth system science as they move into their careers. And from my perspective, my professional opinion is that one of the most important aspects of all of this is that it's couched in a very intentional, supportive, and inclusive community. I believe that the ethic of care that we can put into programs like this is absolutely critical in order to make sure that students feel supported and valued, and that they can thrive and succeed in what can be a very confusing and difficult journey. Next slide, please. So, like the SOARS program, we also believe that community is a key element to student success, and we aspire to extend the cultural notions of family to students' relationships with peers, staff, and administrators, to recreate familial relationships that serve as conduits for activating students' familial capital. So this is academic jargon for our goal is to make the students feel cared about. We want to make sure that they know that we care about them as full individuals, full humans, and not just as students or as academics or as researchers. They come to this program and receive support and care in their entire existence. They're a holistic support system for them. Slide 9, please. So I don't have time to read all of the feedback on this slide, but I've bolded some of the pieces that I hope that you can pay attention to, that the program has had a huge positive impact, provided students with a feeling of belonging, provided them with lessons and relationships that they'll cherish, and generous conference support each year. On the right-hand side, we have a list of the 10 primary aspects of the program that we provide. And we've asked the students to rank each of these over the last few years. And this is the summary of their rankings. So they're color-coded by financial support, community support, and professional support. And you can see that the green and the blue, which are financial and community support, they're really competing for the top spot, that all of the top 7 are these aspects of community and funding that we talked about at the beginning of the presentation as barriers to graduation. And while the professional aspects are definitely important, they are not the things that are preventing students from succeeding. And so I am reassured that the approach that we're taking here is an effective one that will allow students to graduate and succeed and become future leaders in the rest of their careers. And then the last slide, please. These are snapshots of our 4 most recent cohorts, our wonderful fellows. And just to say that our program will be opening to accept applications starting in January. We have a 6-month application period. So if you know of graduate students who you think would succeed in this program, please consider sending them the details of this program, and we'll be reviewing applications starting in June of next year. So they can apply between January and June. Okay, thank you very much.
All right, we got 2 more folks, and then the questions are keep them coming. Ariana from UCLA, please.
Hi, thanks everybody. It's been really inspiring hearing the talks thus far. And thank you for the invitation to speak. My name is Aradhana Tripathi and my pronouns are she, they. I'm a professor of climate science at UCLA, where I've worked with others to found the Center for Diverse Leadership in Science. We focus on reparative climate action and environmental imagination. One part of the center is our oceans programs, and that's really focused on equitable access in ocean sciences and ocean justice. Now, if you just reflect on your own journey to where you are now, I think you can likely appreciate the impact that opportunities for equitable access have had, particularly when you are going through your education and in the early stages of your career. But we're at a time now where students face higher rates of inequality than the generations before, and even more uncertainty. And so our program is really focused on core principles of equity, and we aim to fill a complementary space to other programs. Many programs that are out there support people who've already demonstrated that they are high achieving. For example, with a GPA cutoff. Our program does not have a GPA cutoff, and we are specifically interested in addressing issues relating to access and accumulative disadvantage. We aim to function to support our students given the racialized and gendered inequalities that exist by simply, well, supporting science being for everyone. And so we are intentional about supporting access in a deep way, in meeting students where they are, and then working with them to grow their science identity and specifically their competence and confidence, as well as their ability to work well individually and as part of teams. Now, with respect to ocean justice, there's an appreciation that given escalating climate change and other impacts, there's a growing need for scientists with diverse technical skill sets, but also cultural skill sets, including social awareness, empowerment, the ability to bring their values to action, such that we can foster a socially just transition in the workforce that we need. And so with this, the center's programs emphasize the social context of STEM and promote inclusive practices through the structure that we have that I'll describe in the slides ahead. Our approach is grounded in engaged pedagogy and in different evidence-based interventions that are grounded in the literature. Next slide, please. I want to acknowledge the stewardship of lands and waters in the region that I am in Los Angeles and in other areas. I myself am a settler in California where there have been 3 waves of colonialism, one of which is ongoing, that have impacted communities and our relationships to the environment and to ecosystems. I live and work on Tongva land, and UCLA is a land-grant university with a complex relationship to place. Next slide, please. Such complex relationships and historic and present day inequities lead us to ask a series of questions that guide the work of the center about our climate futures. We ask, who gets to dream? Who gets to see their dreams, their plans made a reality? And who shapes the relationships that we have with climate, with environment, with land, with waters, and with each other? How do we honor the traditional and present stewards of a region? And so with that, we recognize that whilst there are racialized, social, political, and geographically induced vulnerabilities that are skewed to environmental disasters, at the same time, the expertise of frontline communities is often vital for their environmental resilience and health, and that of our greater society for those in other places. And so, you know, I think this is really a critical part of all of our survival. And so the work at the center builds on the lived experience and the state of the art of those in the in the educational sector, with the goal of supporting connectedness to environment, climate, and ocean sciences, and with the goal of having a workforce that represents the communities of this country. So we emphasize access, leadership development, and the social context of the oceans and environment. With that, we are working on equipping and supporting those who are interested in contributing to the climate movement, building the next generation of the movement, and collaborating on specific projects. Next slide, please. So with this, we have fellowship programs that are at the heart of the center. This is an opportunity to cultivate leadership, and we use a networked leadership model where our fellows are specifically working in collaboration with each other. We have with our fellowship programs 3 different ones. There's most of our resources principally go to our early career fellows programs. Those range from high school through postdoctoral, as well as 2 years post-education. The vast majority of our resources go towards undergraduate and graduate students. We also have a community fellows program that supports people who are not in the educational system, and they go from youth through elders. And then we also have a faculty fellows program. They're supported by our staff, by leadership teams that are comprised of the different groups. Our community fellows are on our advisory board. We have an early career leadership team and a faculty staff leadership team, and then a number of different partners themselves that we directly work with. Now, for our fellowship programs, we actually also have two tracks. One really aims to meet people where they are. It's kind of an entry point, our standard fellowships. And then for all of our fellowship programs, we basically have a stage 2 fellows program. We call these leadership facilitator fellows, those who are really actively able to work in organizing and cultivating community and science. The work that we do, that we ask our fellows to do, involves engaging in improving representation in literacy and science through their own skill building, technical skill building and ethical skill building, and then putting those skills into practice through service learning, through storytelling, through team-based research on oceans, environment, and climate-related problems. Next slide, please. So we are bringing together different evidence-based interventions, from supporting community building so people are less isolated, supporting mentoring, as well as a number of different activities. Next slide, please. At this stage, we've supported over 300 fellows at the center. About 20% of them are in oceans. Every year, there are between 70 and 120 fellows we support, but people are able to join at any educational stage if they're early career fellows, and they can continue for multiple years. We also see with our community fellows program, there are tribal stewards as well. Over 80% of our fellows are people of color, and our retention rates are over 95%. Next slide, please. So the interventions we're using are ones that were described in Silvia Hurtado from a meta-analysis that was done of the life sciences and effective diversity building programs in that field, and that's shown in the lower right. By doing this, we can bend towards justice with our work and advance stewardship of the oceans in ways that support adaptation and resilience. As one example of what our fellows are then empowered to do, DeMarcus Robinson, who is an undergrad at Florida A&M University and HBCU and came to do his PhD at UCLA, he then went on to become a Knaus Fellow and published with other co-authors the first U.S. ocean justice strategy. And this just shows kind of some of the recommendations and the vision of the work. I also list some of the outcomes of the approach that we're utilizing. Next slide, please. So I want to just highlight there are many different aspects of the work, and I jokingly say we're like an octopus. Some of our fellows were working with the Northern Chumash Tribal Council in their advocacy for a marine sanctuary. This is just something that's been happening because of nearly half a century of Chumash leadership and the work of a number of different Chumash bands and their work with a number of different partners. But the exposure of ocean science students to being able to contribute their skills to this work is something that's life-changing for all of them. Next slide, please. I also want to highlight the opportunities for students building relationships with nonprofits and tribal authorities and learning what equitable exchange really looks like and how that can be transformative for our tribal partners, their nonprofit partners, as well as for the students themselves. Next slide, please. So with that, I just want to thank you for your time and open it up to the next presentation. Thanks. Thank you, appreciate you. All right. We have our last presenter and then the Q&A may begin. So Charla?
Yes, I'm here.
Wonderful. Please go ahead.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. I want to thank the organizers for inviting SOCNAS to be a part of this morning's conversation and also giving me the last slot. I appreciate the grace. I just flew from New York to Phoenix late last night, and I'm not really sure what time it is. But my name is Charlotte Lambert. I'm the current SOCNAS president. That's the capacity that I'll be talking to you this morning in. I'm also a DEI officer at Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory, trained genome scientist, so I'm mostly educator and administrator these days. And I'm really pleased to be here to talk to you about SOCNUS. It's an organization that is near and dear to my heart. I've been involved with it in one way or another for over 20 years now, if I do the math right, ever since I was a graduate student. SOCNUS itself stands for Society for Advancing Chicanos and Native Americans in Science. It was launched in 1973. We just celebrated our 50th anniversary last year. We're convening this week in Phoenix for our annual conference. There's really great lore about how and when it launched. In 1973, it was a handful of professional scientists in an elevator in, I think, a AAAS meeting in the Southwest. But today, it is, as we like to say, the largest multicultural, multidisciplinary STEM diversity organization in the country. And we function somewhere in between a national nonprofit and a scientific society. So some of the ways that we function will feel very familiar to all of you who are actively engaged in your own home scientific societies. Next slide, please. This is what we mean by multicultural membership. This is based on last year's numbers. I think we were about 10,000 active members. And about half Chicano, Hispanic, Latinx. That comes from the Chicano part in our name. So Chicano, Mexican-born Americans, but also these days Caribbean, Mexican, Central and South American. If you add the American Indian, Alaska Native, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, we're about 8% Native and Indigenous membership. And then on top of that, about 20% of our active membership identifies white, 9% is Asian, 8% is Black and American. And we do this, we say that SACNUS is an inclusive organization, and we do this by really intentionally centering the two groups that are in our name and that were the focus initially, so Chicanos and Native Americans. And so the way that we do things is centered in these two groups, but is open and inclusive to anybody else that might resonate with. Next slide, please. This is what we mean by multidisciplinary membership. So these are percentages based on about that 10,000 active member number that I just mentioned. So about 70% of our active membership is students. About 2/3 of this is undergraduates, community college and four-year students. The other 1/3 is graduate students. And then the other 25 to 30% are professional members, including postdocs, staff members, professional scientists, and a variety of different capacities. And then if you look on the right, this gives you kind of the breakdown of the disciplinary categories that people identify with. We're about half life and biomedical, and then the other half kind of split over a whole bunch of different disciplines. And I think ocean sciences is not its own category that we ask for, but it would be, depending on what people work in, would be somewhere in physics, geosciences, and life sciences, depending on kind of the areas of ocean sciences that they work on. All right, next slide, please. One of our sort of key flagship membership programs is chapters. This program is about 20 years old now. We're up to about 150 chapters across the nation, including Guam and Puerto Rico. And these provide year-round local support, leadership development for the people who start these grassroots groups within their own organizations, mostly students. And then also community engagement and community outreach on a local level. Next slide, please. And this is a quick summary of our other signature programs. I put them into portfolios. So the leadership development portfolio, the first leadership institute that SACNUS ran was in 2009. And now we've got 3 at different career levels, sort of specifically targeted and growing. The Native American and Indigenous portfolio of programs are centered in really close partnerships with a couple of Native serving and tribal colleges and universities, specifically for the students who are there. And then mentoring is kind of woven into everything that we do. A couple of the flagship programs there. It's the annual National Diversity in STEM Conference. That's our annual conference that is happening this week, the reason why I'm in Phoenix right now. And then CareerCon, which is a virtual new but growing program specifically for those who are interested in government and industry careers. All right, next slide, please. And if I had to kind of summarize what the magic of SOCNAS is, I think it would be reiterating a lot of the things that you've heard from other speakers this morning. And these are some pictures from various events. Over on the right, the pictures of a couple of our elders from back in the 70s. And the thing, especially within the last 20 years or so, that SOCNAS leads hard into are these two quotes taken from our website. So celebration, not assimilation, science, culture, and community. And so we do very intentionally weave culture and community and center it alongside of science. And this is in all of the programs that we do, kind of our philosophy of how we develop scientific leaders, how we have conversations around career and professional development. And this is to ensure that our membership, many of whom come from very close-knit communities, very place-based communities, they've received sort of all of these messages about careers in STEM their whole life, that they have to leave their communities, that they can't initially start studying issues that are near and dear to the places where they grew up. They have to go someplace else. They have to do their graduate work in a place that's different than their undergraduate work. All of those messages resonate with some people, but there's a big part of the SOCNAS membership in particular that it doesn't. And it's given the choice. They're like, I think I can choose to do something else besides a career in science. And so for that reason, we put culture and community right alongside of science. So community is woven into all of our programs. Culture is sort of front and center so that people don't feel like they have to compartmentalize parts of their identity in order to study science, in order to be a scientist in either professional scientist in academia, in industry, in government, wherever. And so that's sort of the encapsulation, I think, of the magic of SOCNAS. We, again, for about the past 20 years, we focus on advanced degrees, careers, and leadership in science. And so from undergraduates to professionals, we have this membership where we kind of intentionally put the message forward that what you bring to science should be celebrated and should be centered. And you can, and we're all going to do this together, figure out ways to navigate careers in science in a way that doesn't ask us to assimilate parts of our identity to systems that weren't necessarily built for us. So I think I'll stop there and want to thank everybody again for having me. I'm looking forward to the Q&A and discussion.
Wow, this is a really incredible set of presenters. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm going to summarize two sort of bigger questions, and then I'm going to walk through sort of the series of questions that sit here. But the two bigger questions that seem to be asked in the chat are the following, which is one around sort of sustainability of funding and budgets. It seems like everybody is sort of interested in hearing a little bit more about from each of you what's both the sort of funding structure of this. Do you get it from donations, private funders, grants, et cetera? What is that? And then what is sort of the effort and time spent on quote unquote the constant sustainability of the project? I'll start with that one, and the other one's going to be on sort of relationships, but I'd love to hear from maybe each of you around how that is structured. And Ken, maybe I'll start with you.
Say who you're starting with. I didn't hear.
Sorry, Ken, actually with you, go for it.
Got it. Thank you. Yes, so sustainability of funding comes for the Meyerhoff Scholars Program, in my view, from the success of the program. The success of the program becoming a national model allowed the university to get funding of all sorts. Part of it, it's been from every source, foundations, NSF, NIH, HHMI, Howard Hughes Medical Institute, and then every other foundation has been approached that all in STEM to fund the Meyerhoff students. And I think the reason it often has been successful in getting funding is because there's a lot of data that support the outcomes. So they always have tried to include evaluation funding in their grants. Sometimes they can't, sometimes it's pitiful small amount. But in some of the major grants, evaluation has been front and center with the explicit goal of, if we have strong numbers and credible evaluation from with comparison samples and with longitudinal studies and so on, that we can get funding, and that's really worked. I want to say one special thing has been faculty grant writing. Faculty have written many grants for programs that have spun off from the Meyerhoff program. And those faculty projects, the Mark U Star is an example, the STEM Build program, many national models have been written, funding have been written by UMBC faculty who are affiliated with the Meyerhoff program, and then that extends the program's reach. And then finally, I'll just say that the university does support the program that was founded and supported by the president of the university, not a surprise. That the university supports the president's PET program and one of the reasons why it's so successful. But I do think that there's no one source of funding, it's every source, but I think the data and the success of the evaluation is one of the reasons why it's been able to be. It's a very expensive program, there's no question about it. And it's been funded because it has good outcome data and good process data and good theory-based data and good survey data, good interview data, good focus group data. It's really been a major effort to get the data that will allow lots of different funders to feel comfortable funding it. That's my view. I don't know if any of that is true, but that is my perspective on why I think it's well funded.
Claire, any insight for your program?
Sure. So the Next Gen program is funded by UCAR management funds. And in a similar situation to Ken, it's really been able to continue because it has the support of our leadership. The UCAR president is a champion of this program. And so therefore it's something that he's able to prioritize and make sure that there is funding available for, but it's funded internally by UCAR.
Allow me to chime in a little bit. So it seems like a very critical question in terms of sustainability, in terms of the funding. I want to say, I guess we are lucky enough that we have a main source of funding from NOAA Office of Education, because it's really on the agenda. But then the challenge, again, I want to say is that, for years that we're trying to make ourselves more sustainable in terms of how to really build up the program or activities that in order to, let's say, tap into different funding agencies to build up the research arm that be able to support more students rather than keep relying on that certain funding from the agency, because those are not really stable. And that's actually the challenging things that we, at least from the center point of view, that we are really implement, and we are really trying to do, really expand, reaching out to different group or different agencies that to grow ourselves. So, but it's a kind of ongoing thing. And then to your second question, as you can imagine, that it's really time. The time commitment is incredible. I'm running the center, but it's you have internal thing to deal with all the consortium, with all the partners at the university, and then you also have the external challenges to deal with from the unfunded agency. I think one of the questions was asking how many students, well, definitely you look into the number, how many students we graduate, how many end up going to the workforce, how many actually in certain things like that. So those are really kind of on demand, that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's a lot of time.
Any insight from you on funding?
Yeah, so SOARS is funded fairly differently than NextGen. We're not funded by UCAR's management. We're funded majority through NSF, so it's an NSF funded project. But then a lot of it is similar to what Ken had said. A lot of the scientists write in SOARS, a lot of different groups write in SOARS. We have about 20 students a year, so we need people to fund about 20 students a year. So NSF only funds 13 of those 20, and then we find funding for the rest to get that going. However, we are looking to fund more broadly, especially because SOARS, like I mentioned earlier, is very student focused and students' feedback is very critical to advancing the program. And a lot of them want to know about more career pathways outside of the academic and research sectors. So we are looking into private sector and other government sectors and seeing how they would like to be contributing to the program to hopefully expand and sustain it outside of NSF funding if needed. So yeah, that's basically how SOARS is funded.
Ariana, please.
Yeah, so for the Center for Diverse Leadership in Science, you know, we're based at UCLA, we're grassroots, so you know, you develop because of a group of committed faculty and staff and students and partners. And we're entirely reliant on soft money. It's a little bit challenging sometimes, you know, when we ask the university for funding because we do cut across institutions, because we support people from multiple institutions, because we're multiple educational stage. And also because even on campus, we are multiple, we cut across departments. And so that makes it challenging for any particular dean or administrator to see us as sitting neatly, or if we're writing proposals with an HBCU or tribal institution as a partner and as the main recipient for that funding, there's, you know, interesting dynamics that come into play. And so we rely on a combination of applying for NSF support, as well as philanthropic partners. And with that, it's also kind of an expensive program, which it sounds like all of the ones that we've been hearing from are, you know, that could mean that it's, you know, like $20,000 a student, sometimes more than that, which means that for, you know, depending on cohort sizes, it's very easy to get to the point of having, you know, a 7-figure program budget when you consider funding for students and also funding for staff. So we rely on faculty and staff to do a lot of grant writing and on the strength of our partnerships. I do think there are opportunities in terms of learning from Meyerhoff, you know, because that is a program that has been around since 1988. That there's an example of, you know, university leadership really demonstrating their commitment, and then also being start off in fields in the biomedical field in terms of its origin where there's a lot more funding. So if there are opportunities for NOAA and for NSF to be kind of increasing their funding in these areas, and I know NSF is moving in those directions. I don't know if there are new, you know, NOAA cooperative, you know, programming, what the future of that looks like, but I think that's also another potential area for finding, you know, structural support at the scale needed for the type of work that all of us have been talking about and the work that, you know, the next sessions will talk about.
Thank you. Charlotte, please go ahead.
I'm sure. So yeah, very similar, I think, to kind of a lot of what you just heard from the other speakers. And then in addition, when I mentioned that Softness functions somewhere in between kind of a national nonprofit and a scientific society, it's evident a lot in the funding models. So Softness started off with, and still has to this day, a lot of support from the NIH. And a lot of our individual programs get launched and initially sustained through a lot of different grant writing and grant funding from federal agencies and foundations. In addition to that, like a scientific society, there's revenue that comes in through membership and registration. But sort of none of that is kind of able to sustain the operations that we need in order to put on all of the great programs that are developed. And so, like a scientific society, SACNAS is sort of structured as a 15-person board of directors that come from the membership, along with a small army of volunteer leaders who are organized in communities. But then in addition to that, SACNAS has a professional staff now of about 20 people. And so all of those people together are the ones that sort of check, like see what different leads there are for different funding. And kind of crucially, this is an evolution of SACNAS. Right now, within the past couple of years, we've been moving into much like a national nonprofit, an organization that has its own fundraising arm. And so that is new, and that is, we found, is really necessary to sustain, again, the operational costs. You can always find a lot of really great grant funding to launch new programs and to collect data and to sustain them for a little while. But once they become kind of part of the ethos of the organization, they get integrated into kind of the operations of what the organization does. And in order to do that, fundraising like a national nonprofit is crucial at this point in SACNAS's history.
Thank you, Anna. The other question I see coming through, Gina, did you?
I knew he was at the door.
Oh, okay. The other question that seems to be consistently coming through is one actually about sort of relationships in the community you all are building in each one of these programs. You really seem to be focused on how do you build and sustain a real community for each of these groups of students or, you know, people transitioning through their early career. And it seems to be often an intangible, but like the core of all of these programs. And so I'd love for each of you, if you can, speak to a little bit around both why you feel that is so important, but also two, how are you finding its both value and both measuring it both qualitatively, quantitatively, but why it's such a core part of the work. And I'll hand it over to maybe Marissa to start, and then we can sort of go around.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. I think NSS SOARS has been known for having a really good community and within the atmospheric sciences. I think it's important not just because that's needed, but the retention issue I was talking about previously, if you don't have that community support, if you don't have that community cultural wealth, then they don't want to continue moving forward because they don't have people to lean on. And so it's so important to have that community aspect because they come back to each other all the time. Every time we have an event, they rally with each other and just move forward with life together. And it's beautiful to see. The alumni network is so strong within the program. And I know from what they've told me, and we're doing an impact study, so we'll have a more detailed example of what these are. But from the feedback I've heard from alumni, they say they wouldn't even be in the careers that they're in right now if it wasn't for programs like SOARS. So that community aspect is what is making the retention, or is what is helping with the retention issue, improving the retention issue.
Thank you, Marissa. Claire, from your perspective?
Yes, so I have a similar perspective to Marisa. I think that the community aspect of programs like this is really absolutely essential. There's research that backs this perspective up. There's, especially in higher education research, this concept of familial capital and bringing having safe spaces and where students can be their full selves. There's an awful lot of data and theories on this that I would encourage you to pursue. And then from my own personal academic experience going through graduate school as a first-gen student, and the cave that academia is, and what I would have given to have somebody who can the metaphor that I use is like I have a flashlight and I'm just pointing at some of the more particular corners of the academic cave to draw attention to it for fellows who are going through, who don't know what's on the other side of the cave, because academia is kind of a black hole a lot of the times. And then we have the feedback from the fellows themselves, the both in the surveys that we've started to pursue, and then just the individual conversations that I have with students who are telling me that this is changing their perspective and changing their academic lives and what it is meaning to them. As Marisa said, the relationships between the fellows is really beautiful to watch. The way the Next Gen program works is that we provide them with 2 awards every year. So one in the fall, one in the spring. And then we pay for them to come to either Boulder or Washington, DC for our policy fellows to spend the whole summer on campus with their mentors. And so they get a similar kind of experience to many undergraduate research experience, where we have that cohort development, one-on-one sort of relationship building with each other, with me, with their mentors, with other staff around the organization. And so we try as much as possible to try and tackle that need for support and community from many different angles. My own opinion is that in most graduate schools, most universities and so on provide the sort of skill building, the how do you build a resume piece of professional development. But there is so much more to success than that. You know, it's not a box checking exercise. As we've heard a few times, academia is hard. Doing a PhD is hard. It requires some resilience. It can be quite relentless. It's definitely not an undertaking for the faint of heart. And so giving each other and me giving them the support that they need in order to continue and to persevere and to feel like they can succeed and feel like they deserve to succeed, I think is just really powerful. And, you know, as we saw from our numbers, it seems to be working for this program. Now, this is a very small program. We are talking about, you know, very small number of statistics here. But if it's okay, that one of the other questions that I got was about the idea of perhaps the drawbacks of tapping into familial capital. And I feel like that ties into this conversation. That, you know, a small cohort doesn't mean that we can't create a family. We have small families occur all the time. And when I talk about familial capital, I'm talking about that investment in the whole person. The students call me science mom, and it's because I care about what they want. I don't have personal investment in whether or not they go on to become professors or community leaders or whatever it is that they might do. My job, I see as my job, to be invested in them, in whatever it is that they desire, and how can I help them be successful. So I very much see it as these students are incredibly capable. They know what they want to do with their lives. I have a significant amount of privilege, and I try to take that privilege to open doors and get out of the way, because they don't need me to be in their way or to hold their hands. They know exactly what needs to happen and how to do it, but they face these ongoing blockades of just historical discrimination, current discrimination. And so if I'm able to use my position to knock through some of that discrimination and allow them to succeed, then I think that's a job well invested.
Thank you, Claire. Charlotte, thoughts from your end?
Sure, yeah. So a lot of echoing, I think the previous speakers, I think there's lots of good social science that shows that, you know, sort of community support is essential. I think the issue is that most of the groups that we're talking about have not experienced the brand of community support that's sort of been built into science careers. And so what SACNAS and other organizations and programs try to do really intentionally is to build that in a way that, you know, if we would have designed the system of science, what would community support look like? How would it center, you know, kind of culture? How would it shape what science career pathways look like? And similar to what I heard from Marissa, I hear so many stories all the time, and we have good data on this, that without programs like NSF SOARS or SOCNAS or Meyerhoff, there are a lot of students who would not be scientists today. So they wouldn't have finished their undergraduate, they wouldn't have finished their graduate degrees, they certainly wouldn't have, sort of careers in science. And so for me, I mean, I think the way that we build it is, on different levels, because SOCNAS is kind of large now. So it's on organization, sort of programmatic levels. Individual programs have really intentional kind of cohort building that come along with them. But it's also something that we center kind of on a macro level at the conference each year. So how can we continue to grow the conference, for example, so that we can, reach more students who are working in STEM, but do it in a way so that there are pathways through it that still feel, sort of small and people can really connect to. And so those are the kinds of conversations we have all the time, because community is such a big part of what we do and such an important part, I think, for our students who are participating in our programs.
Thank you. I'd love to hear from Ken, Zen, and Aaron Ariadna to close us out in the last 5 minutes on this question. So Ken, please.
That leaves me 2.5 minutes. So please tell me when I have half a minute left. Don't count the time I just used. So I'm trained as a community psychologist. I believe community is central to everything. And certainly I won't repeat anything that's been said, but there's strong data that supports the importance for students of color. Let me just say 4 things above that are unique to the Meyerhoff program that support everything that everyone has said. One is the summer bridge. The summer bridge is intense. I don't think I would have survived the summer bridge, but its whole goal is like a sports team, is to build community, and I can give examples. But the staff spend an intensive amount of time planfully getting the students to be a community, and they work with individual students who aren't fitting in, and the whole admissions process is to get students who could be part of a community. I don't know if I could have been, so I might not have gotten in. I wouldn't have gotten in. And so the summer bridge is crucial. It's very intensive though, but it does create for a lot of students lifelong connections. The second thing that's somewhat unique, but not totally unique, is they do try to get families involved. They have a family association. They support the idea of families being part and having influence in the program, but they try to build on rather than leave the family behind into this thing, which is very important for students of color, as you all know. Third thing that they do is is the staff. They're not only connected with the students, with their cohort, and the cohort influence is profound in this program and in the programs that others have talked about. It's really profoundly important, but the staff support is also important. The staff are really concerned and sometimes intrusive, but always caring parents. Really, in a way, they call the program a family program. It's built on the HBCU model of family, and the staff really see themselves as family, but they are very heavily involved, very monitoring, very caring, very supportive, but they are part of the community that a number of students can really go to and feel support from. The final thing I want to say is we have done a fair amount of research on the sense of community in the program, the summer bridge and beyond. And it is one of the 20 or so components we ask students about. Community is always one of the top 5. And the sense of community they feel, and the sense of community they feel predicts their commitment to a PhD. In our survey data, commitment to a PhD predicts, not surprisingly, going to a PhD program. So the sense of community, because the program's values are get a PhD, students who really feel high levels of community, and most students grade 4.0 or above on a 5-point scale, are more likely to internalize the values, and the community values are then a unique aspect of the sense of community that helps students persevere. So I want to just reiterate everything that people said. I can just tell that the staff-oriented people here are just terrific. I wish you were my mentor, and I wish you were my support team. Just feel the love and caring and kindness that is central to community. And the staff and I think the faculty at UMBC, even though, I don't want to say this too loudly, even though they're scientists and share some of those characteristics as scientists, not so warm and fuzzy, the faculty are affected by the program to be as heartfelt and as supportive as I can. And the staff and the president of the university will speak to faculty who are not caring and not supportive of the students of color. So having the administration behind you allows you to help other people be maybe more community oriented than they otherwise would be. So I'll stop there.
You can send, and then Ariadne to close this out.
Yeah, I think everybody said, I mean, oh, I agree, everyone's comments or suggestion on that actually will say, for our own experience, again, it's really important part of the process that we link to our alumni. In fact, there's a kind of internal practice that we track individual even after they finish that. We track at least 3 years actually, follow in terms of what kind of career trajectory. Now, more importantly is that besides all the events that we have, then we do invite every year. We do invite previous graduates come back to the campus. Not homecoming though, but I mean just like in terms of the event, we have the all center-wide training event. So we always invite speakers from alumni group that in terms of talking to our students, because one key part of it is that especially from HBCU communities that we all learn from examples. So that's actually a very important piece of the process. We bring people coming back and then talk to our current students. That help a lot. And again, that's how we kind of like, I think Ken mentioned about the family. That's really part of the thing we do here.
Thank you for the wisdom that I've been hearing from everybody on this panel about the different ways that community can be created and how important it is. And there's some wonderful comments as well. Especially Amelia, thank you for some of the comments that you've made. I know this is also an area of your expertise. I want to just highlight perhaps a very quick story because we're up to time, coming up to time, about the importance of community. Our students bring so many experiences with them when they come to university for their grad school, and we may or may not be aware of those experiences and how isolating they might feel. I remember for myself being a person who is dark-skinned in the department, who was also caring for family, who had a parent who was incarcerated. There were just a number of issues, and some of these were things my, community within the department was aware of, and some of them they were not. But what was incredibly powerful for me was having the opportunity to participate in programs at the undergraduate and graduate level that were intentional about cultivating community, where there were spaces where we could be social together, where we might feel safe enough to open up about some of those stories. And then in doing so, actually create our own narratives and feel safe in those spaces and be acknowledged that that we were academics and still should be there, even if we didn't necessarily see or hear from people that were like us. It was a very empowering experience to actually be in a place and be able to share one's story. And then it was also empowering to be in a space and know that there were others who were navigating, their own adversities and learn from how they were doing so. And it was also very powerful to be in spaces and hear from people of different generations that they themselves had experienced certain forms of adversity. And so I would just say that just two things. One is that the support for these types of programs is really key. There's literature on how important they are as counter spaces to the dominant culture. At Santa Cruz, for example, I was part of a Women of Color research cluster that Professor Angela Davis created. And that was a place where we were academics, we were social together, we cooked together, and we also organized on issues around race, class, and gender. The second thing is, please do not underestimate the power of you yourself being in a space of being humble and sharing some of the stories that you yourself may hold, or that you may have heard from others in ways, of course, that are anonymous and the like, of identity, if you're doing this, but just like how that can open space so that people themselves can suddenly feel like they should be there. They should access those spaces. The power of humility and storytelling, I think, is really important. Every single one of us can use those two things as tools to open space up for others, for our students. So thank you.
Oh my goodness, thank you all so much. This was an incredible session. Thank you for giving up your time and your insights, but more importantly, for the work you all continue to do in this field. Just deep, incredible appreciation, and wishing you all the continued success, and just know that you're helping us to shape what this looks like, and hopefully have an impact on the continuation of work like this and to make it bigger and bolder holding forward. So thank you all so much.
Whitney, can I add one thing?
Yes, you can.
I iterate everything that Whitney just said. This has been a phenomenal session. I think the start of a phenomenal couple of days. There are a number of questions in the chat that were for specific programs. If you all have a few minutes to go and answer those in the chat, we are keeping record of this, or if it's easier for you to send us emails or things like that, we will be using the information that you send. And I also put in a call for everyone. If there's papers or your go-to papers that support your model of change, send those to us. We would really like to learn even more from you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right, I think we're adjourning for the next
Yes,
20.
we've got about 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
To panel number 2, I am going to keep the time, and we'll go through just like last time. We'll go through all the panels, all through the presentations, and then do Q&A at the end. We'll just say when you're ready for the next slide, and we will move those slides along. And our first speaker is going to be Paul. So I'll go ahead and hit start as soon as you start talking.
Great, thanks a lot. So today I'm going to be talking about the Diversity Project, which is a summer program that I've been running since 2005. It was envisioned as a very traditional undergraduate research experience. Next, where students would go with us into the field to collect samples. Next, they would then work up these samples in the lab, collecting genetic data and analyze that data. But all of this data was part of my research program. And next, this model was successful. A number of our early alumni are in faculty positions. We're working for large NGOs. Next. But the program changed in 2014 when we were denied research permits in Indonesia. And what that meant is that our research was in Indonesia while our education program had to be somewhere else. And so that ushered in a new wave of the Diversity Project that is more student-centered. Next. And what our program is now is it starts with a week of basic scuba training and orientation at UCLA. And once the students go through basic scuba training, we take them to the lovely island of Moorea in French Polynesia, where we have a 2-week, very intensive AUS scientific diving training program. During this training, they're oriented to local marine ecosystems and are asked to think about why they see the things that they see. And that is in preparation for a 3-day intensive period where students pitch 2 projects a day that they conceive themselves working in groups. And ultimately they pick one, and they spend the next 5 weeks actually collecting the data and doing the projects that they designed. We then go back to UCLA for a couple of weeks where we introduce them to local marine ecosystems like the wonderful kelp forests, work through data analysis and preparation for presentations. And ultimately, this culminates in the Diversity Project Research and Networking Symposium, where they present their work. And one of the cool things we added this year is a Discover Scuba program for the students' parents. So that the final day, the students are actually diving with their parents in the pool. Next. So just some examples of projects that they've done. This is one cohort from 2018. One group looked at energy allocation in a macroalga Turbinaria ornata. Next, another looked at how structural complexity of coral reef impacted ecosystem function. Next, another group looked at the importance of sea urchins in herbivory of algae on coral reefs. And even though that these projects were developed and conceived by the undergraduate students themselves, next, every one of these studies from this cohort, next, was published. Next. And so, you know, these students aren't advancing my research program anymore. They're developing their own questions. And next. So one of the things that's different about the diversity project now is we have the sustained mentoring model where we bring students back for this research and networking symposium, uniting students over multiple cohorts. We had about 60 students there this summer. Next. We take all of our students to present their work at conferences like the Ocean Sciences meeting, or more recently to the Western Society of Naturalists. Next. This is possible in part because we now have a dedicated postdoctoral scholar that works with us to help maintain those connections over the course of the year. Although Alex Davis is now a faculty member at CSUN, so we're looking for our next dedicated postdoctoral scholar. Next. And a really key part of what we do is for this research networking symposium, we bring students' families in and we engage the families, because if the families aren't on board supporting the aspirations of these students, they simply aren't going to continue on in marine science. Next. So we've done assessment of the program. Here's just some of the data pre and post 2014. Dramatic shifts in wanting to pursue careers in marine science, dramatic shifts in the number of students wanting to go on to graduate school. Next. And just to look at some of the impact of the program, we've had 120 alumni so far. 20 of them have earned their PhDs, 31 are currently PhD students. We have 8 students applying this cycle. 19 students have received master's degrees, 3 Fulbright fellows, 18 NSF GRFP recipients, 6 tenure track faculty to date, 2 staff scientists at the Nature Conservancy, and 2 more lines there, Safa. There's a staff scientist at WWF and 2 ASLO board members. But the impact of the program extends past the program itself. Next. Our alumni are creating nonprofits of their own to advance diversity in marine science. So Aaliyah Griffith created Mahogany Mermaids, which is focused on getting young Black girls interested in marine science. And then next, Tiara Moore and Camille Gaines, they created Black in Marine Science, a growing and very influential group in marine science now focused on supporting the success of Black marine scientists. So combined, this is expanding the impact of the diversity project, making science, marine science more inclusive. And this is something we can all celebrate. Thanks.
Thanks. I was so engrossed in the presentation, I forgot to give you the 1 minute. Notice. Oh, yes. Apologies for that, Paul.
No problem.
Next up, we have Anne.
Hello. Can I get my first slide? Can you put it into showing the slide? Oh, there we go. Thank you for this opportunity to describe the Coastal Science and Policy Program. It's a graduate program. I'm going to refer to it as CSP for short. It's a graduate program at UC Santa Cruz. And CSP has an interdisciplinary faculty from departments in 2 divisions, the Physical and Biological Sciences Division and the Social Sciences Divisions. And the deans of those 2 divisions oversee the program. It is a self-standing graduate program, so it doesn't sit in any department, with 13 core faculty and numerous additional faculty. We offer, next slide. Next. We offer a 2-year solution-focused Master of Science degree. And a distinctive part of this curriculum is that for the entire 2nd year, each student is immersed away from campus with a non-academic partner organization, either in government, nonprofit, or business. Business sometimes involves startups that they've actually created before coming to grad school or that they are in the process of creating as part of their project. And they conduct a project, a capstone project is what we call it, that they co-design with a partner organization. We also offer a PhD designated emphasis. Think of it as a PhD minor, which students already enrolled at the university and enrolled in the PhD program of a department, which has included the Ocean Sciences Department here. Those students can pursue this PhD designated emphasis. A key requirement of designated emphasis is that one dissertation chapter is on solution aiming research on which the PhD student collaborated closely with a non-academic partner. For example, a recent PhD graduate who did this designated emphasis worked closely with the California Coastal Commission and is now actually working for them as their first ecologist on marine and coastal issues. Next. The CSP MS degree stands apart from a conventional thesis Masters of Science as summarized on this slide. I'm just going to mention a couple points in the interest of time. After the campus-based coursework in year 1, the defining experience for the student is the year 2 capstone project, which they've co-designed with a practitioner partner and with faculty advice and executed by the student. And the student, when accepted, does not automatically get assigned to a faculty lab. They're not embedded in that lab. Instead, in their first year, as they start designing their capstone project, we push them to interview a number of faculty and eventually land on at least one faculty advisor, though increasingly our students often have 2 advisors since their projects are so interdisciplinary. Keys to our students' success include a cohort structure that builds the community I was hearing talked about in the first set of presentations, first panel. And this cohort structure has high diversity and inclusion. We provide significant one-on-one mentoring and an emphasis on developing skills in leadership, innovation, fundraising, and communication. So those skills, along with the natural and social science that they learn, is both integrated into their courses and a lot of co-curricular activities, workshops, seminars with practitioner leaders, etc. Next. We're now at the start of our 7th year, and we have trained 91 students, 68 Masters of Science, and 23 PhD designated emphasis. Our Master of Science students have secured career-enhancing positions either before graduation, which is happening increasingly. Sometimes they get hired by the partner organization and integrate their capstone project into that position, or they secure those positions within 6 months of graduation. We've had a diverse student body from the outset, which has involved 50% domestic US students and 50% international students, mostly from the Global South. 71% of our students identify as persons of color, and of our US students, it's 25% of our students who identify this way. We have raised more than $9 million specifically for the CSP program. By we, I mean primarily me, the director, and a small, very talented staff, and a few faculty members involved too. And of this $9 million, we're really proud that 1.5 million of it is external funds generated by our students, especially as a consequence of the fundraising training that we give them in their first year. Next slide. And our students are winning a steady stream of national and international awards and honors before or soon after graduating. We have a full list of these awards on our homepage. You may recognize some of them, such as the National Geographic Explorers Grant, New England Aquarium Marine Conservation Action Fund Fellowship, and also grants for a number of projects, NSF GRFP, NAUS Marine Policy Fellowship, etc. Next slide. These successes result from a very intentional, systematic approach to our recruitment and training. And I can't emphasize enough that robust financial support is essential to recruiting and retaining highly diverse cohorts of students. To date, the program has partially supported 57% and fully supported 39% of our students. And I'll add that the founding faculty who actually designed this program, and then afterwards I was recruited to UCSC to be its inaugural director, took a risk and decided to fully fund everybody in the first cohort as a way to really launch the program and sort of make sure that we got great success and also good attention. But since then, we've adjusted the funding model. Once enrolled and they're in the door, our students succeed due to a number of factors. One is a strong, supportive community. I love the prior presentations emphasizing empathetic community. That really resonated with me. That's a lot of what we do. Also significant one-on-one mentoring, especially by our small team, and transformational learning from combining their coursework and lived experience to design and conduct a project with a partner organization to address a real and timely problem. Next and final slide. In the future, we want to stabilize funding of CSP to assure its long-term viability, maintain its early successes, and scale our impact. And one option we're exploring now, as we're about to undergo our first external review, is to establish an advisory council to help us strengthen fundraising, such as building out an endowment. This support would enhance and stabilize funding to support students, co-curricular programming, and possibly some part-time professor practice positions. We're especially interested in that last one because we've just established our first professor practice position with a colleague from Conservation International. And this slide has just one of many quotes that you can see from our alumni on our website. And we're actively recruiting students right now. And here's information about where people can learn about that. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Of the three presentations we've had, I've known students in like all three of your presentations. So I'm looking to see if I can go 4 for 4. So Sonia, if you're on the phone. Yeah.
Hi, yes, I'm here. Can we please first start off with playing the Demumta film? And then we can go over the slide. The film is gonna give us a great idea of the motivations of the program, for which I'm the program coordinator. And then start from there, and then we can move on to the specifics of the slides. Thank you so much.
Indigenous peoples have been sustainably and equitably stewarding fisheries in Alaska for tens of thousands of years. Deep knowledge and governance systems developed over millennia help guide these respectful Indigenous relationships and ways of life. Over only the last few generations has Indigenous stewardship been disrupted by federal and state management systems. Systems that prioritize industrial extraction for outside profits, that view fish as commodities rather than kin, and silence Indigenous voices and connections to place. From the outside, Alaska fisheries are widely praised as among the best managed in the world, and yet deep inequities, structural racism, and Indigenous erasure persist.
These Western management systems have failed the fish and the people. Stock collapses from cod to crab to salmon are evident across the state, and Indigenous peoples continue to be criminalized in our own homelands for living our traditional way of life.
Driven by these injustices, scientists and Indigenous leaders came together to develop a program to transform fisheries education, research, and governance in Alaska. The program, housed at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, is called Demumta. a Supiaq and Yupik word meaning all of us.
Through the creation of the Damamta logo and painting, Yupik artist Apayak Moore brilliantly represented how Indigenous knowledge systems embody deep meaning, including aspects of connections with land, spirit, and all relations. Damamta strives to provide a comprehensive graduate program to Indigenous and allied students that will become the next generation of scientists and managers in STEM fields of fisheries, marine sciences, and beyond. We uplift graduate fellows who center Western sciences, Indigenous sciences, and bridge knowledge systems in their work. Innovative courses and research experiences, elder mentors, cultural immersions, and all program elements engage decolonizing and indigenizing approaches to help transform fisheries systems in Alaska.
Damamta is one of the National Science Foundation's research traineeships focused on innovative graduate education in the United States. It is an increasingly recognized model for post-secondary education that uplifts and centers Indigenous knowledge systems in relational and respectful ways.
Damamta is all of us.
Damamta is all of us. Damamta is all of us. That's what it means, is all of us. We're all doing this together.
Thank you so much. Can we switch to the slide, please? So I wanted to start us off and ground our time together with that film because it really highlights the motivations of this graduate training program, Damamta, and the inequities that have existed in fisheries across Alaska, the experiences and the hardships that Indigenous students face in Western institutions of education. And our focus of Damamta is to elevate 14,000 years of Indigenous knowledge and stewardship to transform education, research, and governance across Alaska and beyond. And a couple of program elements that I just wanted to highlight are our model is really grounded in relationality and student support. Relationships and reciprocity are one of our core values in the way that we support our students, in the way that we support them doing research in their home communities and with their tribes. We have an Indigenous and Visiting Scholars program. And another key element of our program is the racial equity dialogues that we've been hosting across the state of Alaska. We find that in Western education systems, that there's a lack of understanding of the inequities that Indigenous people face when it comes to harvesting their traditional fisheries, being criminalized, having their way of life not recognized and limited. And so one of the key program elements has been to hosting racial equity dialogues using First Alaskans Institute, Alaska Native Dialogue on Racial Equity to talk about these inequities exist, to talk about how racism and colonialism is deeply embedded in fisheries education, research, and management. We also have an Indigenous Advisory Council that helps us vision out how we should be doing the work and how could we support the ongoing work that many of them have been advocating and fighting for in fisheries for over 60 years. We have elder mentors that come to program events, conferences that we host. One of the other key elements as well is hosting annual retreats where we bring we have 3 Damamta cohorts. We bring allied faculty that are affiliated with our work, our elders, university leadership, and thus far we're supporting 19 Indigenous and allied graduate students in our program. And we are in this, we have 2 years left of funding. And so we're currently in this phase of trying to find sustainable funding to keep our program going. And so I'll just leave you with 2 quotes from, one quote from one of our students in our advisory council. And the first one reads, "Damamta has opened many doors I am still in awe of the opportunities I have through DMUMTA and how much the program has allowed me space to grow into the Indigenous scholar I am today. And then from Jonathan, our advisory council member, he says, DMUMTA is where I see change happening in real time. I see it in managers. I see at different levels, tribal, federal, state. Change is crystallizing through these fellows. And with that, I will end here. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share, and a shout out to Paul, who was a previous mentor through the Diversity Project. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. We have 2 more presentations. Benjamin is up next.
Hi. In 1972, I had the good fortune of being one of just a few white students graduating from predominantly African-American high school in Detroit, Michigan. This is the era of Black power, Black consciousness. And so I understood I had lots of white privilege, which I brought to the University of Michigan with me. And ultimately, that led to my founding the ASLO, what we called at the time, minorities program, now the multicultural program, in 1990. Next slide, please. So I got to apologize first and say the slide shows a bit dated. I gave it at a conference a year and a half ago, but I had an unfortunate beach accident and died and drowned. Very embarrassing for a competitive swimmer. And anyways, so I'm sent to rehab hospital now, and a little late on the thing. So anyways, let me acknowledge the Algonquin Nation, where Hampton University exists. Next slide, please. And the program was developed with understanding the need to attack systemic racism and colonialism, and to recognize the asymmetry of privilege and power. Next slide, please. So, and this slide just reminds us that there's a big underrepresentation of people of color and other marginalized folks in the aquatic sciences, and particularly at the PhD level. Next slide, please. You can read about ASLOMP in a couple publications here, and a couple more that have come out since. But let's go into the next slide, please. So ASLOMP was envisioned to partner with the Association for the Sciences of Limnology and Oceanography, take place at the annual meetings. We bring students to the meetings a day early and bring them through a very structured program. And these are just a few of the venues that we've met at over the years. And those are also on the t-shirts that the students get in community building. Next slide, please. So by the numbers, like I said, it's actually more numbers now, a couple of years later, but we've had over 1,500 students go through the program, coming from more than 300 different institutions, predominantly female, and it's aimed at undergraduates mostly, but we have beginning graduate students in it. We also like to grow the students through, so we'll bring the students back as they move on from undergraduate into graduate levels. It's been very successful in terms of diversity. 43% participants are African American, 33 Hispanic, and then we have a nice representation of Pacific Islanders, Asian folks, Native Americans, etc. And as I mentioned, we give the opportunity to grow the students through, so we bring them back for multiple participations. Next slide, please. It's been funded by National Science Foundation since 1990, a record, I think. And typically 70, 80 participants per year. We pay for all the expenses of getting there, participating in special field trips, etc. And then there's a monthly newsletter that goes out. Next slide, please. We start with an opening dinner, and there's a keynote address, and the ASLO president will speak to the students too. Next slide, please. We have the next day Sunday field trips, hopefully to aquatic environments. Next slide, please. One of the things ASLOM pioneered is this concept of meeting mentors. So we collect volunteers to be mentors. Paul Barber was an early meeting mentor. Thank you, Paul. And other members of society. And we match their interests with the students. And they begin conversation with the students prior to the meetings. And then the meeting mentors help navigate the students through the participation during the week. And this meeting mentor program has been adopted by other scientific societies and actually by ASLO itself as a general meeting mentoring program for anybody. Next slide, please. There's a student symposium where students get the opportunity to present their research in a friendly environment. So there's an oral and, of course, a poster session. And the students are encouraged also to go in the regular sessions. Now, when we first started this in 1990, there were relatively few students that had research experiences to present. So theirs was a more passive participation. By the mid-90s, we started requiring everybody who participated to give a presentation. Next slide, please. And like I said, many choose to go in poster sessions. Next, please. So when we started the program, it was very intentional. I wanted to grow students up to leadership position. So Dr. Deidre Gibson was the first African-American elected to the board as a regular rep. Dr. Mina Pollard, another alum, also came on the board. And then we've had a good number of student reps on here. Paul has, Barbara mentioned both Camille and Tierra. Next slide, please. And we've got some notable ASLOM alums. Some you've heard about already. I want to point out Dr. Brandon Jones. He's an NSF program director, and he's the new AGU president. Next, please. As I mentioned already, we invented the meeting mentoring system, and these are some societies that have adopted it. Next, please. And that will be it. Thank you. And hi, Paulinus.
Thank you very much. And this will take us to our
Hi,
final.
Ben.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to talk about the Living Marine Resources Cooperative Science Center and its impacts on increasing diversity in ocean studies. Next slide, please. The Living Marine Resources Center is a consortium of 7 institutions. We have 4 historically Black universities and 3 non-MSIs. The center is led by the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. We also have Delaware State University, Hampton University, and Savannah State University. The non-MSIs are University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science, Oregon State University, and University of Miami. Next slide, please. Our mission is to prepare students from traditionally underrepresented and historically excluded communities for careers in marine and fisheries science and to be eligible for the future NOAA mission workforce through exemplary academic and research collaborations. Next slide, please. We have 6 goals, and these goals are aimed at strengthening collaboration across the center institutions to offer academic programs in marine and fisheries science, to enhance capacity to conduct research that is aligned with NOAA fisheries priorities, and to increase capacity at the center to administer the program, to disseminate information on its activities and accomplishments, and to assess and evaluate the center goals and objectives. Next slide, please. So the center's research thematic areas are aligned with the National Marine Fisheries Service Strategic Plan goals. We have 4 thematic areas: stock assessment, healthy habitats, climate and ecosystems, seafood safety, aquaculture, nutrition, and pathology. And we try as much as possible to integrate social science and economics in each one of these research thematic areas. Next slide, please. So bearing in mind the mission of the center, there are important core elements of the program that I would like you to take note of. One is a cooperative agreement with NOAA, and it has special award conditions. And the lead institution of the center has to be an MSI with a PhD degree program in marine science. There are several specific award conditions, some of which are that at least 50% of our funds must go towards direct student support. The students are supported as fellows. We pay them stipends, pay their tuition, pay for their travel to scientific meetings, purchase supplies for research. Not more than 20% of the funds go to non-MSIs, and each graduate student must have a NOAA scientist as a committee member and who also serves as a mentor. And it is a requirement that each graduate student that we support spend at least 12 weeks interning at a NOAA facility, working with a NOAA mentor. All these are designed to ensure that much of the funding that we receive goes towards training students, go towards direct student support. Next slide, please. Here are examples of best practices at the center. We use a joint student recruitment plan. So when we recruit, we are recruiting students that may be interested in any one of the center institutions. We use an online portal through which prospective students send their applications to the center, and these applications are reviewed by the program directors of the center. We have an annual Fellows Assembly Workshop, which we also refer to as the Cohort Experience Workshop. It creates an opportunity for the students to get together, to network, to form a cohort. We also use that workshop to introduce them to different research themes of the center so that they get to know also about NOAA and the NOAA EPP MSI program and the Living Marine Resources Center. We also use the workshop to provide them professional development activities. We organize an annual session at the American Fisheries Society. It creates an opportunity for the students to present their research work and also to network. And we have core competency requirements, and we provide professional development training. Also, our students are required to write proposals. These proposals are reviewed by their thesis and dissertation committee members and also reviewed by the technical advisory board. And these are members, these are NOAA scientists who review the proposals and provide feedback to them so that they can improve upon the research work they conduct at the institutions. Next slide, please. So the center has significant impacts with regard to increasing diversity in ocean studies. It was established in 2001, and since that time, we have recruited and trained more than 1,000 students. About 77% of these individuals belong to underrepresented minority groups. We have graduated more than 630 students. in NOAA core science areas. Next slide, please. And to be more specific, between 2003 to 2022, 11% of PhD recipients in marine science who are underrepresented minorities, they received their training from the Living Marine Resources Center. And in particular, 26% of Blacks or African Americans and 8% of Hispanics and Latinos who received their PhDs in marine science in the US during the same period, they were supported by the Living Marine Resources Center. And of the graduates from the center during this time period, 41 work or have worked for NOAA or NOAA contractors. Next slide, please. And here are samples of Living Marine Resources Center graduates who are currently working as NOAA employees. We have Lonnie Gonzalez, who is now a division chief at the NOAA National Ocean Service. Larry Alade is a supervisor research fishery biologist at the Northeast Fisheries Science Center. We have Dominic Lazare, who works at the the Southeast Regional Office. Chantel Davis also works for NOAA Fisheries. And Latrice Denson is a stock assessment analyst at the Southeast Fisheries Science Center. And Stephanie Martinez Rivera also works at the Southeast Fisheries Science Center. And here are there are just a few examples. Next slide, please. Many graduates from our center proceed to other institutions where they receive their master's or doctoral degrees. And here are two examples. Tierra Moore, who was mentioned previously, and Camille Genus. They completed their degrees at Hampton University, supported by the Living Marine Resources Center. Then after that, they proceeded to UCLA, where they completed their doctoral degree. And Camille also was an RU intern at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. So, besides the impact of the center using funds that we received from NOAA EPP, it has impacted underrepresented minorities in other ways. For example, the capacity that has been built at the Living Marine Resources Center made it possible for us to establish a research experience for undergraduates in marine science at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore in 2009. It is one of the only 2 RAU sites in marine science at a HBCU in the US. And during that period of time, we've trained more than 150 students, and about 75% of the students we trained belong to underrepresented minority groups. Next slide. Thank you very much for listening.
All right, we have the Q&A. There are some questions in the chat, and I've seen some people have already started answering some of them. So if you see that some questions directed at you are in the chat, please take a look at them if you can. I'm not sure where the chat for the last one ended and the new one began, but there was definitely another thread about funding. And I wondered if any of the speakers wanted to chime in on how they've managed to achieve long-term funding. And then in particular, there's a question from Javier about some of the lessons learned. He asked about hear about the unexpected lessons, positive or not, that might emerge from the hindsight of having run a program for more than a decade.
Just to clarify, sorry, I'm trying to find the right one. Are you talking about funding or generally, like a broad meta?
Probably both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to speak first. Does anyone else want to go? Give everyone an opportunity. Should I jump in?
Yeah, jump in.
Okay.
Speak up. I'll go after you.
Okay,
Right,
great.
and then Ann, great.
So one thing that, in terms of the funding, we found it very, very difficult because what we do is we fully scholarship, 4/5 of these we work with. Fully, that's travel. There's been times where because a youth can't be in our intensive summer program, which is a 2-week intensive with Patty on the front and back end, which ultimately makes it 3 because it's an international convening and there's travel involved. It makes it very high dollar when you break it down to be per child. And so to try to justify that dollar per child, often to funders, there's challenge, I think, with them understanding the ripple effect of where this goes. It's not just that one child that goes through our programming and becomes a leader that views the world a bit differently, but it ripples to how they move forward in the world. So that is, I think, the bigger challenge for us as funding is the cost of our programming due to that. And we don't skimp in our programming. We make sure that we provide local organic food through the local community. We partner with the community. They eat food of the area that's healthy, and it's a holistic program. They're on the water. And as you all know, I think in the US, it's very hard to get youth on the water because of the liability. Well, we just make sure that happens. We make it happen. So it's costly, and I have no regret. We've been doing it for 8.5 years, and we'll keep doing it that way, but that is an uphill battle. From a meta perspective, in terms of my greatest takeaways and working with youth for 8.5 years in this way, and I saw a question about for us specifically, like what do we draw from for empathetic leadership, skill-oriented work? And on the front end, in 2017, we went to the place of in-person consultants, and we did a 6-month workup with all various consultants, from mindfulness practitioners to DEI consultants. We connected deeply with the Ramta Shaloni people of where our headquarters is organized. And what we found along the way, we did book clubs, we're deep in resilience initiative, different consultations, which is great for the last 4 years. But what we found along the way is how we operate with youth is we go in with them and deep into their community. And our greatest learning comes from spending our time with them. Like none of us from ED, from any level, we're all horizontal. We don't pull up and out, we're in it working with them. And that means shared learning. The most we learn is from them, and from them with each other. So I would say, like, I've had amazing conversations with such people as Catalina Martinez, who really works deeply in the DEI space, I think, as you know, of NOAA, from Dr. Tusi of American Samoa, from Ka'u Kalani Souza, who we partnered with in 2021 for a particular event, and Razvi Tom. There's been so many incredible humans that we've spent deep, meaningful time with that I feel like turning to scientific papers doesn't work for us. It didn't. Our journey's been a bit different in that regard. And it's what we've done and what we've learned through these amazing people and these relationships has been what's created our programming today. And we do plan to develop that out into curricula as soon as we're working on scaling and building capacity now. Which is why we have a new ED. But we're looking to get that into a program that can also be utilized in schools and other places.
Ann, I think you were next.
Yeah, I need a reminder. Was the question about lessons learned about the funding?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So I guess in a nutshell, the lesson I learned is be very agile, believe deeply in what you're doing, allow the students to speak in their own voice and to really be able to tell stories to potential funders about the amazing things they do. One thing that I didn't feature in my slides, but it's important to emphasize is we really stress recruiting applicants who are early career leaders, which means they've been out of school, out of college for 2 or more years. And that means they already have some networks developed. And our students often actually come from communities where they go back to do their capstone project. And I think that the networks that they already have are kind of like the starting kernel. And then we put a lot of time with them in the first year in a capstone planning course that I teach both in the fall and the winter, where we work very much in workshop style with all of them learning from each other and helping each other we help them really build out their professional network in a very systematic way. We teach them how to, put out initial emails, how to rely on people they already know for warm intros, how to do informational discussions. All of that is searching for a partner, but also looking for possible funding opportunities. And I think that's part of why we've been so successful, is that the majority of the students have started that. And then we're very deliberate in helping them grow that out in a very systematic way. That said, we've had a few undergrad students, one who's been extremely successful, just won a NAUS Marine Policy Fellowship. But I think that part of why they can elevate really quickly is because they are a member of this community of peers who are brilliant, come from all these different diverse backgrounds, have amazing life experience. Now that all that said, still finding the funding is a demanding undertaking. I still spend a lot of my time doing that, and that's part of why we're talking now about trying to create an advisory council so that I have a team supporting me and to do this in a more systematic way. We've been doing very systematic, but do it in a way that's a little bit sustainable and more sustainable in terms of time demand on the director. I care a lot also about succession. So I'm not planning to step down anytime soon, but when I do get ready to retire, I want to make sure that when I hand this program over to the next director, it's a little bit easier for them to do the continued fundraising. Final thing I'll say is we're also working increasingly in coalition with other partners. So we are part of a NOAA grant, one of the climate challenge grants that was just awarded to of over 40 partners in the Monterey Bay region. It was a $71 million grant. Most of that money is going to nonprofits and governments that are doing on the ground projects to build climate adaptation resilience. But $2 million of that came to UC Santa Cruz, with over half of that is to us to support some fellowships. And also it'll allow our students to actually have sort of more direct access to all these amazing partner organizations. And we're hopeful that that's going to open up also new opportunities for more sustained sort of structural funding support.
I'd be glad to offer comments if you want.
Please.
Okay, so ASLOM's origin goes back to 1989. SAML, the Southern Association of Marine Laboratories, was formed to kind of counter Woods Hole and UW as big centers, and looking for funding. And NSF said to them, "Well, do something about diversity." So I was at that meeting, fortunately, and that gave NSF knew we existed. Okay, I just arrived at the faculty at University. Anyways, the REU programs had just gotten going again after Reagan had killed them some years earlier. And so fortunately, my funding got tied to the REU programs. And that's made it very convenient for us because we're kind of known in their budget. Now, as part of that, it's kind of funny thing happened. Russell Cool and Carmen Aguilera served as meeting mentors several times and said, "Oh, let's do a program just for REU students." And for 15 years, they ran a parallel program to ASLOM. But because we provided, sort of more value experience, the program director said she wasn't going to fund them anymore, and I had to take all those students on, which meant bringing in white students. So now the program is more diverse in that sense. But that's what we had to do to keep the thing funded, is we had to, acknowledge what NSF wanted to do. And I do want to point out, Paulinus and Paul spoke, and we exchange students all the time. Okay, and so the idea of ASLOM is it's a nexus to provide student opportunities, and that's synergism between all our various programs. And I think some of the other speakers have gotten students from them programs indirectly too. That's where the power really is.
Anybody else want to chime in on funding? Benjamin just brought up exchanging students. Is that how you just said it? And I thought Kiki had in the chat a question about students that are peering in multiple programs. Is that directed at anybody?
It was that everyone.
Okay.
You want me to rephrase?
Yeah,
it?
go ahead.
I noticed that we saw Tiara and
3 times,
Camille
yeah.
coming up multiple times. That's really been my lived experience. I've gone through multiple programs, and I'm curious how much you all as running individual programs are aware this exchange is happening, and how much you take that into account in your theory of change. That you are stewarding a student or early career professional through a chain of programs, and how do you coordinate that? It's a lot. Take a piece of it.
So, I mean, I'll just comment that, one of the challenges that a lot of our alumni have faced is that once they go into other programs, none of the ones that we've talked about here today, but there are programs that they've gone to that they have a very different experience than what they have in our program. To the point of, students, wanting to go to a certain school for their PhD, they go there for a summer REU program, and at the end of the summer, they're like, oh, hell no. And so I think that there's a tremendous amount of value of having students move through some of these programs where they are nurtured, collectively in an ecosystem that is supportive, community-based, and they'll be facing challenges soon enough. But I think particularly, at the younger stages, making sure that they stay on that path is really, really critical.
Yeah, as academics, we're trained to say no, to grade things, to judge, and we're not trained to say yes and provide empathy. And I know Paul and Plinus have done a great job of finding reasons to say yes. So that's a whole change of culture. And I think Paul really nailed it there. Many institutions still exist in the say no mode, the gatekeeper mode. And you really don't want to direct students there because they don't find success. I did a program in conjunction with Old Dominion University in Virginia Institute of Marine Science. And it was not big NSF, several $1 million program. And I still had trouble, despite training and all that, with the whole gatekeeper mentality, and why give these students something extra that our other students don't get, not recognizing, special needs. It's all, a matter of keeping the doors closed.
I can just add briefly, first of all, I really love this question. It makes me realize that we've been doing some of this, but maybe should be more intentional about it. But first of all, we maintain a really large list and keep growing our list of places we recruit applicants from. And to give you an example, we've had a number of students from the Doris Duke Conservation Scholars Program. So we're very careful to kind of stay in touch with people who run those programs. Also, we bring in speakers. We try to emphasize diversity in the speakers we bring in into our seminars. They're often practitioners as well as academic professors, and we ask them to talk about their career paths, not just their work. And one consequence is that then some of our students who eventually go on to do PhDs end up working with those people. So for example, Javier right now is hosting, I think, both a postdoc who did our PhD designated emphasis and a PhD student who did our master's degree. The student who did the master's degree went back to his country of Indonesia and actually continued working and building out his amazing nonprofit, Thresher Shark Indonesia, before deciding to go on for a PhD. We are sending a number of students to the Black and Marine Science program. So I was delighted to hear, I think it was in the prior presentations, that the founders of Black Marine Science were involved in one of the programs here. We use that as a way to really help support networking for our students, to spread the word about our program. And then when they come back, we have them share with all of our students what they have learned. So anyway, I think it's a great point, and I'm eager to actually be even more intentional about it. And I agree with your point, Ben. Saying yes really matters.
All right, just want to note that George is very successfully getting his questions answered in the chat. And thank everybody who is talking to him that way. We'll do our best to capture some of those there. I have a question kind of directed back at the panel, and we've got about 7 minutes until lunch, so maybe this will take us until that time, unless we go over. And this is we've heard from 14 presentations this morning. And I just wonder if any of you saw any more themes that kind of emerged overall. Like we heard about community, mentorship, opportunities for work and training, leadership. Like, are there any more themes out there that kind of add to this secret sauce that makes this work?
I want to just give space for Paulina and
Oh, sorry.
Sonia. Paulina and Sonia, I want to just give space first before
Okay, thank you.
I respond.
Thank you.
Can you
I'm sorry,
repeat that
what did
question
you-
one more time, please?
The question was, we several themes have already emerged out of the 14 presentations that we've had this morning. Creating community, providing like multi-level mentorship, creating opportunities for work and for training and for study. I heard leadership several times. Just thinking about the secret sauce that makes this work. Are there any other themes that we missed in this discussion?
I'd like to add to that. I was thinking about doing something different than the status quo has certainly been a theme across. And some in terms of the work that we do at AIRS may call it experimental, but it's really based off of the feedback that we receive from the youth that we directly work with. And I am also, last year I was the cohort chair for the 4th cohort of the USYSE, and now I've stepped into the space as staff and project coordination for the YSE. But where people say this may be experimental, I say no, not necessarily, because from my Mexican-American culture, my African heritage as well, you'll see within our familial and community spaces, the idea around empathetic leadership is almost ingrained, just being mindful to others. And so we do something different in that regard, but it is actually because of our feedback that we receive from the youth in terms of what works and what doesn't. We do incorporate feedback year to year. It's incredibly important for us as we also change with the times and what is also relevant to Gen Z and the content that they are in tune to. And then back to the culture thing, for me as well, it's what we have seen, at least from my perspective and my family, is that it's very easy. I've had to wear the DEI officer in other spaces as well. And these concepts are easy for me to grasp because of the cultural components from what I learn at home. It's easy for me to have understanding. It feels like common sense in many ways. And so because we're doing this natural exposure to youth, where you see a lot of DEI needing to be implemented in spaces with adults. Whereas, I believe in terms of addressing climate change is multifaceted. We need to be addressing it multifacetedly. It's the same thing with our youth. We need to be able to do that in a way that allows them to see the cultural practices and share those things around DEI that naturally come through. And as well as multi-generational teams and incorporating DEI in that way. It's like a multifaceted approach, but doing something different has been really helpful. And I've seen that there's multiple organizations so far that have presented doing something different than the status quo.
If I could follow on, only because I think we were reading each other's minds. We are very heart-oriented. We're not so head, and we're very unconventional. And so one would say I'm mama to many, because I truly believe that, and this goes to, I think, what you were saying, Dr. Jenkins, how do you move forward, considering the various programs and schools that they're going to go into career paths once they're through our programs. But we find that the youth of Barrister Ocean don't leave. And we're there to support them, like us who are the elder adults in the room, we hold this scaffolding so that they can go get their education. They can do those things, and we still hold that space. And if you look at our leadership page, the global youth leaders sit above the board, and that sits above the staff. So they're the ones who advise us, and they come together. In fact, in 2
Just
weeks,
this
they'll
summer,
meet again.
yeah.
And we're in person this summer. They tell the board what to do. And that's a real snapshot of youth from around the world in that convening. But the piece that's important there is if there's a young man from Marshall Islands who doesn't have the support he needs to make up the balance of his cost to go to school, to get his undergrad degree, we go to our direct services program that was specifically organized for that purpose. So in all the ways, shapes, and forms, we're there for them, and they're held as they go on to these next spaces that aren't as head-oriented.
Mm.
So I think that's a special sauce for sure, I would say.
Can I add something, Angelo?
Sure, thank you, please.
Just adding to that last comment, which I could have said also about our program. We, I think, have been happily surprised by the degree of incredible learning. It's both that heart and mind learning that the students have gained from each other, and especially because they're such a diverse community, diverse backgrounds, racial, ethnic, economic, different cultures. And we have found actually that diversity then begets more diversity in that many of our applicants, and often when we're competing with some other really highly ranked school, when students decide to come to our program, they say it's because they want to be in a diverse community of learners. So that's a plus, that they learn so much from each other, and we provide so many opportunities in their formal courses, as well as when they're out in the world doing their capstone projects. They are required to meet once a week at their whole cohort with faculty who leads them through a weekly sort of debriefing session, and also troubleshooting and further leadership training. And that's on top of the regular mentoring that they get from their faculty advisor and their capstone mentor. And I was going to make one other point that I've now forgotten, so I'll pass it on to somebody.
Don't blame you.
Right.
Intersectionality is also really important. And, I showed my numbers, like percent African Americans, percent Hispanic. Let me tell you, that doesn't tell the story. So many students are now multiracial, they different orientation, different backgrounds. So, as scientists, we like these nice, neat categories, but they really don't tell the story. And the programs need to have the flexibility in them to not only recognize, but to celebrate that intersectionality. And it's really nice as these cohorts develop, the near peer interactions, and bisexual students find each other, share experiences, and all this kind of thing, that we just never really addressed in diversity like 30 years ago. So diversity's hopefully it's evolving, but we just need to recognize and support that the intersectionality piece.
Angelo, to add to what others have said, being intentional about recruitment of the students is also important, and long-term funding and capacity to leverage funding from other sources is also important for sustaining these programs.
I will Sonia, is there something you'd like to chime in on? And then maybe we will finish up this session.
Yeah, thanks, Angelo. One of the things that I wanted to highlight some of the secret sauce, at least in our program, that it's a NSF graduate training program, and it's a very successful program. And so recruiting and supporting Indigenous students, unlike any NSF graduate training program that has existed thus far. And one of the key aspects of our program is how we center transformation and really pushing against the status quo of what it means to be a scientist, researcher, be in academia. And I just wanted to put in the chat for everybody of, how have we been recruiting students, and what's the criteria in which that we use to support students that are interested in transformation. in recognizing that the fisheries system and ocean science system in which we are deeply tied to in Alaska is deeply racist. It's deeply colonial. And that infiltrates within the education system, within research. And so we use this set of criteria to support folks that are really ready to roll up their sleeves. And what we find, and why we're having such a hard time finding long-term funding, is that we have a lot of organizations that say, wow, you're supporting so many Indigenous students. We want a piece of that. We have some money, but the student needs to be doing this type of research in this region. And we want them to continue to do research in a way that supports the status quo. And so we've actually had to turn down many funding opportunities to say we are doing transformative work so that Indigenous students feel heard and supported in the classroom, so that when they advocate for their people, for their communities at the federal and state management bodies, that body of knowledge, that deep ancestral millennial knowledge, is actually being listened to, being heard, being implemented, because right now it's completely being ignored. And one of the many reasons why we have so many unsustainable outcomes to fisheries across this state. And so one of the things that we're kind of shifting to as our students are graduating now is how do we support these students to armor up outside of our very supportive program. And so we're working with Indigenous leaders to create a supportive program as students continue to face racism, colonialism, implicit, all these types of bias, and they're trying to change systems, that they have a cohort of individuals that might be based in academia, federal and state organizations, nonprofits, that they have a cohort of people to armor up with, to support one another. Because what will happen, and I've seen this be part of a graduate training program that I was a part of, is once the program runs out of funding, that energy fizzles out, that transformative nature fizzles out. And so we're trying to at least keep that part, whether or not we have sustained funding with our Indigenous partners, to help our students keep doing that transformative work. And then also help educate our prospective funders of, we need you to be on board to change these systems with us, and not just take one of our students that is Indigenous and say, you have an Indigenous employee. We want you to start reflecting some of these criteria that I shared in the chat of how we want these systems to change, so that it's just not another Indigenous employee filling another seat at an organization. Thank you so much.
We also need to consider near-peer mentoring, which is integral to the program that we run. Our graduate students work with undergraduate students. In fact, each proposal reviewed by our technical advisory board is required to have an undergraduate student and a graduate student. And so that near-peer mentoring is important in our program.
I don't want to be the one to kill the good vibes, but I want to do a time check with our chair. We are a little bit over and there's still hands up. Oh, no, hands are down. I think, can we give a round of applause to our 7 presenters?
So I think right now we are going into our lunch break, and then we have closed session after lunch. This has been such a rich morning. I am filled with energy for what this study can say as a result of these presentations. I am positive that our subcommittees are going to be following up with some of y'all in more detail, because we know there's a lot of receipts and information to back up your saying. And I would encourage you as much as you can to join us for the open sessions tomorrow and keep this community of conversation, particularly our funders conversation. So we are having one where we're talking with philanthropy, and I think it's really important to hear from you all in the Q&A conversations that happen about risk-taking, experimenting, and doing something different and supporting that. So, thank you again for all of your time, and we are back after lunch for the closed session at 2. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.